Hi, I'm Dr. Kimberlee Mendoza, and this is Oh, I'm sorry. I must have got distracted. This is Blue Fire Faith, and today, guess what we're going to talk about? Distractions. My research has all been on squirrels, which is Generation Z. They say that a squirrel has an attention span of 1 second, but if you give them an acorn, it will go up to something like 4 minutes. So, hopefully we can give you your acorns today. And if you are easily distracted, which I think most of society is today, we all get on our little phones and we're always on there. We're in work, we've got kids, we've got jobs, we've got hobbies, we've got sports games, we've got problems with our marriage, we've got financial situations, we've just got, news, bad news that's just pouring into our lives, the internet, the web. I mean, the technological age is just full of distractions, and our attention spans are going down and the distractions are going up, and it's just ridiculous, right? And so I'm sitting in church and God gives me the word distraction. That's just in my head. Now, what's funny about that, as soon as that word came into my head, like I need to write about distraction, I started getting distracted in church about the word distraction. So I had to quickly take out my phone, write it down so that I would know what I was thinking, and I could stop thinking about it and concentrate on what was being said on the pulpit. So we are distracted. Our attention spans, man, they are just, I think they said like Gen Z is now 7 minutes or 7 seconds, not 7 minutes, 7 seconds or 8 seconds. By the way, I am going to be planning to do a podcast for my Gen Z stuff because I've written a book and I've done a lot of research on it, and I travel all over the United States speaking on it. So if that interests you, go ahead and put that in the comments and I will get that going soon. Anyways, back to, once again, squirrel distraction. So I want to show you something. So if I am trying to read my scripture, or I am trying to see what it is that God wants me to do, a lot of times we try to do it like this, and we've got our Bible in front of us, and I can't see what you want me to do, God. I can't see it. And then, of course, there's the trying to listen to him, but we can't hear him because it's just so loud in our lives. When I worked at this other institution in San Diego, they were remodeling the entire outside of the building. I guess some of the tiles were falling off or cracking, and so they were coming out and redoing all of them. And they did it during the summer because less people are there in the summer at a school. However, some of us were 12-month employees, and so we were still there. And we're trying to do our work, and we've got this jackhammer sound like right outside our window. And talk about a distraction. Like, people would come in and be trying to talk to you, and you can't understand them because it's so loud. Or imagine like you're in a restaurant, one of those sports bars or something, where it's playing the music super loud and you're trying to talk to your colleague or whatever, and you can't hear each other, right? That's the kind of things that happen in our lives, because I'm going to read to you in 1 Kings, and I've read this story before in one of my videos, but I just love it. So I'm going to read it to you. So the Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." By the way, this is to Elijah, and this is in 1 Kings 19, starting in verse 11. "And then a great and powerful wind tore through the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper." And that's when he heard the Lord. So how often in life are we so much noise, so much distraction, whether that's TV, radio, internet, family, work, like people like that we just don't need to be listening to. Like, there's so much stuff that we never give the whisper of the Lord a chance to breathe. We never can see what he's trying to have us do because we're so distracted by what we're seeing or what we're watching. We just don't stop and listen to the Lord. We don't stop because of all the distractions. I had this epiphany when I was thinking about distraction in church, being distracted in church. I had this visual in my head of, so I have a couple things that I am praying for really deeply right now. There, I actually have 3, and they consume me a lot. Like I'm trying to worship the Lord, and I'm thinking of these things, and I had this visual, and I think that's why the word distraction came into my mind. It's like, you're really distracted right now. You need to let that go. And so I had this visual. What if I took those things and I lay them at the foot of Jesus? So I have this vision of not a full-on vision, supernatural or anything, but I just had this concept in my head where Jesus is standing in front of me, and I lay those things that I'm struggling with at his feet. Well, guess what happens when I'm not holding them in front of me and now I've put them down? Where do my eyes go now? I don't need to look at his feet. Who sits there and stares at someone's feet? No, most people, if you lay something down in front of somebody, you stand back up and now you have a clear view of the person right in front of you. And so now my focus can be on Christ because I'm not distracted by those things, those heavy things that are in my arms. If you are carrying something and someone stops you in the hallway and they want to talk to you, you're trying to listen to them, but you're so distracted by the fact that your arms are about ready to fall off. Or for me, because of my condition, I need to sit down. And so a lot of times people are talking to me and all I'm thinking in my head is, I really want to go sit in a chair. I'm trying to listen to them, but I'm distracted. And so I think that's what happens is we're carrying these heavy weights, we're carrying these burdens on our shoulders. And so we're not really fully focused on Christ because we're so distracted by the worries of the world, what's going on around us, all the noise, all the visuals, everything. And so I know I'm saying some of the same things over and over, but I feel like it's really important that we get this because I think so often we say we understand, but do we really digest this kind of stuff? And for some reason, it just really hit me today that we need to do that. So I have a couple things that I think will help. For me, one of the biggest things, and like I said, what I did in church is I opened my phone I have a note page in my phone. I typed everything in that I was thinking, and now it's out of my head and I can focus on the sermon. So I say, journal. I do that at night, if I have ideas in my head, or because I really struggle with insomnia. So because I'm type A, and type A people tend to struggle with insomnia because they can't shut their brains down, I will get out a piece of paper in my journal and I will write down everything that I'm thinking of. So now I can release it. And I think you can do that on your phone. You could have a little notepad that's in your back pocket or in your purse or whatever, where if something is just really distracting you and you can't think of it right now, you just quickly write that thing, give it to God, and move on. That's the first thing I think you can do. It's a simple thing that you can start putting in your life. Even if it's just a word, you put that word in the phone, and that word stands for whatever it is that you're walking through. The next one is just really learning to pray. And when I say pray, I don't mean you can do the quick, Lord, I need you to clear my mind right now so I'm not distracted on this. I totally believe that you can do that. And I think that's a good tool too. But I also mean, you've got to find that time. I know that Toward Faith, that whole 40-day thing that I've put on here, and Blue Fire Faith, it's really all about finding a place alone with God where you are giving him your full 100%, life, that you are surrendering to him and your prayer time is 100% his. But once again, it's hard to get to a Blue Fire Faith if you are always distracted. You have to find that time where there are no distractions, and that's not easy for everybody. So I highly recommend, starting to figure that part out. Sorry, I need to do this real quick. Now I'm getting distracted by a little tickle in my throat. That's awesome. Okay. For a while, I went to a therapist because I was struggling with some anxiety for a while. Sorry. And she had this visual for me where you put your problems on a leaf and you let it kind of go down the stream. And that's kind of coming back to laying the stuff down at Jesus's feet. Because once that distraction has been laid down, you have no reason to go over and pick it up. He's going to pick it up for you. And so you just give it to him and leave it there, walk away. Sometimes that can help as well. So having that visual. And then ultimately, it's about trust. Trusting God that he's got that. we get in our head so much and we think about things so much because we truly aren't trusting God to take those things and do something with those things. Now, there are physical distractions that aren't as easy as these 4 things I just gave you. If you have small children and they're running around you and they're screaming and hitting each other and all of that, that's a distraction that it's like, you can journal and you can pray and you can say, I'm putting them down at your feet, Jesus, and all that. And they're still yelling and screaming and running around you in a circle. And so, my question, I guess, would be, once you get them to bed at night, are you taking care of your spiritual self at that point? And the spiritual self is very interesting. It's very holistic. When you take care of the physical self, you also take care of the mental and the spiritual self. It all kind of goes together. So if you, rather than jumping on your TV or on your phone or whatever, once the children are asleep, give yourself 30 minutes to an hour to just tarry in God's presence, play some worship music, make it your time with you and God. And I promise you, you'll start to feel better. It's really interesting how that works. I have 2 older boys now. I mean, they're both adults, and one has his own kid and one is getting ready to get married. So it's been a while since I've had the little kids, but I still remember what it was like, and I was going through school full-time, working a full-time job, doing ministry, and had 2 small children. So talk about being distracted. I was distracted. But what I finally one day woke up and said, I have got to have an hour a night where I sit in my own space and it's just me and God. If you haven't seen the movie Prayer Room, I highly recommend it because it's exactly what I'm talking about. That's actually what kind of inspired me to start doing that, as to have my own space. So if you got to go sit in a closet somewhere so that you have quiet and nobody is bugging you, then I highly recommend that. Let me just talk about a few of the biblical distractors that we've seen. So Samson, he was distracted by his love of Delilah. So sometimes wanting to be in a relationship and wanting to make someone else happy, that can be a distraction, and it kept him from his purpose, what he was called to do. I mean, from a very young age, he had been molded to become a certain thing, like not cutting his hair and eating right and all this. And then I got a little bug that's trying to distract me right now. He didn't fulfill his purpose because he was distracted by this other person and wanting to make them happy. And so, luckily God is a forgiving God, and he still allowed him in the end to fulfill his purpose. But at what cost? He had to, kill himself in the process. Another one is David. He was distracted, man after own God's heart was distracted by lust, something that he had no business liking or wanting. How often do we want something it's not really good for us? It's a bad distraction. There's been times when I get caught up in a TV show I have no business watching, and it becomes a huge distraction, and I start to feel that. So, whatever is in your life that maybe isn't godly, I would say that's like David with the lust, is like, it's to his detriment too. He lost a little kid, and God was not happy with him, and so it distracted him from his calling to be the person that is after God's own heart. And so that one, the most famous distraction of all, would be Martha, when she was trying to get all the preparations ready for Jesus, and Mary was at the foot, and she's so distracted by getting everything perfect and ready that she's not really spending time with Jesus. And of course, we know Jesus said that Mary chose right. And so that's an ultimate distraction, right, that we can literally put into our everyday lives. How about Saul? Saul was distracted by jealousy. How often does unforgiveness or jealousy distract us from our purpose or our calling, or where we're supposed to be, or who we're supposed to be friends with, or loving others? Like, we get distracted by those emotional feelings in our lives that are not godly. I would say if you can't forgive somebody, then you're distracted by that. It is going to keep you from being who you could be for the Lord, because you start to think about those things, you get your mind set on those things, and that distraction is not going to work well for you either. So we know Saul lost his kingship because he got so distracted and he started doing things he shouldn't have been doing. And then he was awful to David because he got jealous, and he just destroyed himself. He had, if he had just kept his eyes on God and done what God called him to do, maybe he would have been a king longer. So, and then I think of the last thing that we get really distracted by. We look at the disciples and how distracted they were by the storm, rather than knowing that Jesus was in their boat. They had just witnessed a miracle, and so they should have trusted him. And instead, they were so distracted by the big waves and the water blowing on them, and we're going to drown. And they're so distracted by what the world is showing them, rather than really realizing that if they just kept their focus on Jesus and said, "Hey, Jesus, hey, do you think you could turn off the water right now? We'd really like it." He would have probably sat up and said, "Absolutely." And, bam, it was taken care of, because, the waves knew Jesus's voice from creation. So they did what they were supposed to do. So ultimately, there's so many ways we can get distracted. There's more here. I just wanted to, for some reason, it just felt really important that I talk about this, because I think that, until we get rid of the distractions in our life, or at least curb them for a time, we will always struggle with being closer to God, because he's not in the distraction. He's not in the noise, just like we saw in the verse I gave you. And of course, I'll give you one more verse as we go. And this is one that you've heard a million times before, so it's not going to be new to you, but I think it truly is important to say, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And that is, the renewing of the mind is not being distracted by worldly things, but letting God be the ultimate in our life. All right, that's it for me. God bless you guys. You have an amazing week.